Hi, I'm Chris Sarandon, and welcome to Cooking by Heart, where we revisit the vivid memories of the food we grew up with.
I couldn't believe the tastes and the flavors.
Lydia Bastianich. Hi, Chris. Susan Sarandon.
And the people and the stories attached to that time in our lives.
You know, I've been dying to chop this up with you for a while now.
Yeah.
And I would do Julia Child.
This is a lovely chocolate macadamia nut truffle that has dark chocolate. You can get it in milk chocolate too. I prefer the dark.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alice Waters. Thank you.
I was the one, sort of like mommy dearest.
He'd order one side of the menu and eat that. And then when he'd finished eating that, he'd order the other side of the menu and eat all of that. He emptied the kitchen.
Food is the thing. Come on. We know that. Dan Page.
My guest today is multiple award-winning actress Stockard Channing. Channing is well known for her roles as Rizzo in the film Grease and for her Emmy-winning turn as First Lady Abby Bartlett in TV's The West Wing. In addition, she originated the role of Wisa Kittredge in the stage and then the film version of 6 Degrees of Separation, for which she received Tony, Oscar, and Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress. She won a Tony Award for Best Actress for the Broadway revival of A Day in the Death of Joe Egg, and has received Tony nominations for her work in The House of Blue Leaves and The Lion in Winter on Broadway, as well as winning a Drama Desk Award for Best Actress for Woman in Mind in New York. Her film appearances include Mike Nichols' The Fortune, as well as The Big Bus, The Cheap Detective, Heartburn, Up Close and Personal, Practical Magic, Moll Flanders, among many, many others. And in addition, she received an Emmy and SAG Award for her work in the television special The Matthew Shepard Story, and also received the London Film Critics Circle Award for Best Actress for her role in the film The Business of Strangers. She now resides in London, where she often works in both Fringe and West End theater. And if I continued with the acting honors she's received, I wouldn't have time for our talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to welcome Stockard Channing to Cooking by Heart. Hi, Stockard.
Hi, honey. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Much better.
Good.
Seeing you again. I saw you recently in London, and it was such a great evening.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. We usually start the show with provenance, where we're from, because it informs so much about how we began our childhood, obviously, and how our families coped with eating. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Manhattan on the Upper East Side to a prosperous family. Mm-hmm. My parents were much older than I was. This is important. My mother was, this is going to tell how old I am. My mother was born in 1910.
What?
And my father was born in 96.
Okay, I've got you. My father was born in 1895.
Yes. It's a very curious situation. So, you know, I was raised sort of in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as you know, love to cook. We love to eat and all that stuff. And I look back on how I was raised. I mention that time because I remember going out with my family to dinner.
Yeah.
And it was really great to have a shrimp cocktail. And and that little glass of tomato juice.
Oh, yeah.
That the bottom half was in a thing of shaved ice.
That's
so
right.
When you lifted up the glass, it got colder and colder. And it went down. And there was some roast beef, I think. There were lots of lamb chops. Mashed potato. There was nothing. I think on a Sunday night there was Chinese food.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was raised in New York, and.
But did you guys go out every night? No, somebody cooked at home. Yeah.
My mother did not cook
at
all. She and my father were in business. They would go out, so there would be somebody in the house that was making food, which is usually lamb chop, which is fine. It's great, you know.
Yeah.
But was not exactly exposed to home cooking, as they used to say it. You know?
Yeah.
I was never taught to cook.
So there was a cook?
But I was also, because my father was in the shipping business, which means that in the summer, as early as 5, he would drag me and my older sister, because we would go travel with them for business reasons to Europe.
Oh,
So the thing is, I also was exposed to French, Italian cuisine in restaurants or room service or this and that, just because that's the way it was.
yeah.
That I'm not complaining about at all.
No, getting back to what was going on in the household, and then we'll move on because I'm obviously very interested in that as well. So was there a cook in the house?
Sometimes not. I don't remember very well, but also I went to boarding school when I was 12. So that was just, aside from holidays there, but it was a pretty haphazard situation. It was not what I don't want to call traditional, hearth.
Yeah.
I just never was exposed to any of that.
So there weren't any evenings sitting around or there weren't many sitting around the table chatting as a family.
If there was no one else to cook, my mother would open a can of corned beef hash and slice it and fry it, which we were all very happy with.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have anything on your good friend and my wife, Joanna. I always ask for a recipe, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But her recipe.
All right, open a can of corned beef hash.
Right.
Slide it through, push it through, have to do both ends.
Yeah. Oh.
Slice it, fry it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Actually, it sounds pretty good.
I haven't, I should try it soon. It's just
since then.
Yeah.
But at any rate, Joanna's recipe for the podcast was a TV dinner. Because that's essentially what her mother ended up cooking most of the time.
Yeah, I remember those. I remember those very well.
So were there any times when you were on your own? Let's say you're going to school in New York City before you went away to boarding school, right?
Right.
What about street food? Did you expose yourself to any of that when you were a kid?
No, that was not allowed.
No, it wasn't allowed.
No. I had no money. I got $1 a week allowance.
Yeah.
Might have gone up to $5 before I went to boarding school. That never came up. No.
And when you went to restaurants, it was almost always the same kind of food. It was sort of traditional.
Oh yeah, I remember these hotels long gone. That sort of thing, or it was all that kind of very bland stuff. But that's
right.
Because, I'm older than Joanna, and I lived in New York, and she was in either LA, so it's a different atmosphere.
Yeah.
Very formal kind of places, and even if they were a little hotsy-totsy, I don't remember the food because it was so long ago.
Yeah. Okay, so then when you were in school in New York City, were you eating lunch at school?
I guess so. Oh yeah. Sort of macaroni and cheese and the commissary-ish thing.
So there was a cafeteria / commissary, whatever.
Yeah, there was. They just gave you food.
Right. But nothing terribly memorable.
No.
I'm finding this interesting because you've become such a remarkable cook.
Oh, thanks.
The kind of blandness of the background.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it's a reaction?
But you remember there was this cold sort of wet macaroni salad?
Oh, yeah.
Does that come to mind?
Mm-hmm.
It's just school food. It was this trouble.
Yeah. Either that or steam table.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Overcooked vegetables and soups and burgers.
Don't remember it. And when I went away to school, also the adolescent, you eat too much bread, you stuff yourself, you gain 5 pounds, you think you're going to kill yourself. It was all that kind of thing. Food was, I'd be honest with you, I had a very important relationship in my life that was much further down the line than what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And this man absolutely taught me about food, cooking food, setting stuff. I had already been exposed to it to a funny degree, but it solidified that aspect of how to enjoy life. I mean, how, in terms of food, in terms of cooking. And it was in my life until he died. But the first few years that we were very close to each other, I think he influenced. I remember he was part of the million things he did. He was an actor, and he said, if you know how to cook as an actor, you'll never starve.
Yeah.
And so he basically taught me how to make good food.
As a helpmate, as a sous chef, what were you doing as he was cooking?
We would read cookbooks together. By that time, I had been married very young in a very conventional situation and tried to cook, and I was crap at it.
Oh, yeah.
But by the time I met this person, Paul, I'd already, I sort of knew the basics, and we were drawn to each other. And we would literally read cookbooks together. And so we traveled together, we made and ate food together. And I think at the time, I'm trying to think, I was in my middle 20s.
Yeah, yeah.
He was my teacher of life.
Not only food.
Not only food, of life, various cultural things. I don't know. I want to go heavy detail, but he was a wonderful human being, and also was a teacher of life. Life, you enjoy, how you enjoy life, whether it's food, culture, opera, music, whatever.
Right. I'm going to just drop back a little bit, not too terribly far, because it's interesting that you describe the food that you grew up with in the early years. You know, I did an episode with Michael Patrick King, and Michael's description of his mother's cooking was the only time there was any flavor in the food was when she cried in the mashed potatoes.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, which is a wonderful way of not only describing the food but also the relationships, the interrelationships in the family, which were very difficult.
Yeah.
Let's take you to boarding school. Was there any improvement in the food there? Because you're eating 3 meals a day.
No, there actually was a kind of a dessert that was like a coffee custard thing, which was referred to by the local girls or my classmates as Beethoven's Last Movement. There you go. I mean, the classic kind of, thing of an adolescent girl.
Again,
but
everything overcooked.
Everything
or under.
I don't know, but I don't have very many memories of that, except there was a Coke machine that you put into it, and it would go klunka, and the bottle would come down.
Yes.
And that was my probably peak culinary experience.
You talked about this man who helped you through this period of your life.
Yes.
Before that, between boarding school and you went away to college, yes?
Yes.
And you were in Boston.
Yes.
What was the food like there?
Well, actually, I got married at a very young age. And so in those days, it was curious. You sort of went straight from being an adolescent to being married.
Yeah, right.
And I had to learn all the skills. And Walter was only a few years older than myself, but he was at Harvard Business School at the time. I hadn't even graduated yet. That's another story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was suddenly thrown into this thing of being a wife with little dresses with jackets and this and that. This is the 60s.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was married to actually a man. They ultimately divorced, and he became Walter's divorce lawyer. Never mind. I mean, that's, the world. We were all changing our lives in the 60s. But anyway, my friend, her husband would go down to that big market in Boston, because at that point we lived in the Pinckney Street, and he would find something that was completely obscure and bring it home. This is the Saturday fun, and bring it home to his wife, and she had to figure out how to cook it. And we had these sort of bizarre dinners, and I think that's when Julia Childs had first came out.
Yep.
And it was like cook-offs. You had to, and it was sort of interesting and sort of fun and also terrifying. And Daleen, I can't remember now if we just alternated times, but we would make these elaborate things. And when Walter and I were first married, I could barely poach an egg.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I sort of put it on myself. But it was all about following orders. It was all about, people who were in their early 20s acting like they were 45. It was this very strange thing, because this is, things were burbling around us in the world in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
This particular circle of people had very little access to that. And I remember Daleen and Weld had 2 very small children at the time, 2 little boys. And I was in my early 20s, and we were all friends, but it was that weird thing that making of food was very much about a formality, very much about, hey, almost a competition.
I was just getting ready to say the word competition. Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and there was also, and it lasted on and off into the 70s. I mean, it's still going on somewhere, but if you know what I mean, it was you go to someone's house and, oh, look what I did.
Yeah.
It was a terrible pressure, and I really wasn't that good at it.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I was trying, but I had other things on my mind.
Yeah. And it sounds like there was a great deal of stress attendant. to that?
Well, yeah, I think if I can say this, sounds awful. I was doing my best to be a housewife. I was doing my best because various reasons I wasn't in university. I was doing my best to manage the budget, manage this, manage that.
Yeah.
I was doing my best, but I was, 22 years old and dressed in clothes when I had to go out, which were for people 15 years older than I was. It was that weird transition time in the 60s, if you were in this kind of world that I was in.
Yeah.
It was fascinating because after that, when I kind of broke away from it and I got divorced and I left everything, I think I became what my friend Daleen, as I mentioned earlier, called the world's oldest living teenager. Because I completely went
back.
I sort of have the youth I never had.
Yeah.
And it was true, absolutely true. Went back acting, the music business, rock and roll, blah, 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 and it all sort of piled on, and it was, that was it. I sort of ran off, joined the circus, and everything that was. But that was the time. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Now, was this still in Boston?
Yes. I didn't really come to New York until it was a transition thing. I was trying to find a place to live and this, that, and the other. There was that sort of Boston, New York connection with work or not work, and friends.
Had you fully committed to being an actress at that point?
Oh, yes. When I left my first marriage, I definitely, that's what I was doing,
right,
along with a lot of other things. So I left a whole world, and I left. Walter and I stayed in some connection until he died. But it was crazy. We were both so young. We were such kids.
Yeah.
It's sort of like little kids putting on big shoes on their feet,
Yeah.
But we did it with the best intentions.
What was the seed of your need to become an actress? Where did it start?
It started in a very specific situation. I was this young married person living in an apartment that was being renovated by my beloved young husband, who on the weekends would, moonlight with a hammer and nails, and actually did a very good job of it.
Yeah.
While going to Harvard Business School. And then a friend of mine was doing production of Threepenny Opera in Cambridge. Wonderful genius man, no longer with us, called Tim Mayer. And he turned to me and said, "You'd be good as Jenny Diver." And I said, "What?" Because I'd done some work, at Harvard, little drama things, but nothing of any note. And so I went and I guess I sang where I read for him. And they cast me in it, and it changed my life. There's really no other way to put it. I went out on the stage, lights came up, and I sang that pirate song.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what she was talking about.
And
I'd never had that experience in my life of being so fully committed and immersed, knowing how to make a decision. I had absolutely no background in. It was magical, and it changed my life, literally changed my life.
Oh, yeah.
So I swerved away. It took a couple of years, but I started local work in Boston and Cambridge, and
you're still married. You're still being the good housewife.
Yeah. I was, juggling things.
Yeah.
I had a job at WGBH as the worst production assistant they probably ever had.
Oh.
But that's what you did.
Yeah.
Young, you juggle. But I was in productions mainly about Harvard, and then also at the Theater Company of Boston for wonderful David Wheeler. Yeah, and so when I left my marriage, I went back to Boston and Cambridge and acted there. And then ultimately, I came back to New York a few years later and tried my hand at it.
What prompted the move?
I don't know. I thought it was time to go back to the city. Because also I was born there.
But was it prompted by your desire to work in New York as an actress?
Yeah, to work.
What was your first big show in New York? Was it Two Gentlemen? Two Gentlemen Verona? Speaking of how you and I know each other.
It was very, as you know, it was a very odd time. I was very bad at auditioning. If someone said, come read a play,
Yeah.
I was great at that. That I was good at. I could, in front of a lot of people. But I was always lousy at auditioning because I never really knew what they wanted. I remember Lynn Meadows said to me, it was just like listening to a radio tuning. I was trying to find the frequency. But when I would have a whole play to read with other people, I could pick that up.
Yes, you knew your place.
Nothing to do with your question. But that, so I was so down and out. And anyway, I was up for an audition for In the Park, Two Gentlemen Verona. And I raced across town and stood there, and John Guare was there, and everybody was there. Galt McDermott, blah, blah, blah.
Yep. These are the creative team that basically adapted the Shakespeare play. John
Joe Papp was there.
And Mel Shapiro, Joe Papp, right.
You had to sing a song, so I sang their Annie Welch song called There Were Worse Things I Could Do. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Never mind. And John said, oh, that was great. Would you sing that again? So I sang it again. He said, who wrote that? And I said, Lenny Welch. Oh, that was great. So meanwhile, the if you remember that summer in the park, there was this, the whole conceit of Two Gentlemen was that you had to be black or Puerto Rican, but the maid was white. Remember? That was the deal.
Yep.
Or if you were not Puerto Rican, you had to look like you were Puerto Rican.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Whatever. Anyway, so I got a call when they were moving to Broadway. Did I want to come be in the chorus? And this was a low point in my life because after my glory in Cambridge and Boston, I was suddenly, but it was also a wonderful time. But then at one point, there was an opening, to put it this way, there's an opening for the understudy for the Puerto Rican lead.
Yes, who was Diana Davila. Yep.
Yes, Diana. So Diana Davila came to, actually, she was playing it. She came to me and she said, my contract was up. And she said, Stockard, would you like to go on? I said, what do you mean? She said, because I think I feel a little tickle in my throat for tomorrow. So I may not make tomorrow's performance. And I said, oh. And also, everybody in the, I've been there for like a year.
Yeah.
I was the oldest person in the company. And I said, okay. So I went on, and John cheered me on, and God love her. And the next day I was back in the chorus, but I was a standby.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to show up every day. I mean, it was all like that. But I did a fairly good job and went on and a couple more times. Blah, de blah. And then when they were going for a national tour, they asked, I went on at Christmas for 2 weeks, and you and we rehearsed together.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
They were going to California, and they asked me to, didn't work out for this person who was playing it. And they called me up and said, would you go to California and open it? Which would never happen now.
No.
Because I'm not Hispanic.
Yes. And I wouldn't have been cast either.
I did the best I could.
Yep.
Called acting.
And by the way, your rendition of Diana Davila, who was a very special human being.
Absolutely.
In so many ways.
I owe so much to that sweet woman. That was her idea. I didn't come and, please.
And she was a tiny, quite lovely, beautiful, visually beautiful, but also extraordinarily eccentric.
Yes. Well, yes.
But in a great way.
Yes. Thank you, Diana, because seriously, she called me and said, would you like to go on tomorrow? Because I know it's the last day of your contract.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like helping me to be a standby, to be whatever. It was so dear.
Yeah,
incredible.
And she used to have, I don't know if you ever attended these, I didn't, but she used to have a salon, a sort of literary salon in her apartment where she'd invite writers and painters and various people over to converse about the arts and life. She was a very interesting woman. Very interesting. Yeah.
I know.
So now you're in California.
Oh, yeah. I'm in San Francisco and LA.
In all this time, so you've moved to New York from Boston. You're on the road now. You're in California. Are you cooking for yourself?
No, but I had a boyfriend at the time that I remember we got Marcella Hazan's cookbook because by this time, I didn't know how to cook. And I said, check off what you want to eat. Ding, ding, ding. Right. That was with two gentlemen in at the Amundsen. And then I was living I did The Girl Most Likely To. So that was like late 70s or something, like that time.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting into foodie territory because this is when the foodie schmoodie thing was really starting to blow up all over the world. I think I was eating more than I was cooking because that was the time. Nouvelle cuisine is that and the other. It was when in LA even the restauranting started happening,
and it was healthier, and you could rationalize that I can eat as much as I want. I'm talking for myself now, at the time, because it's healthy, and I don't have to worry about calories because most of this food is relatively low caloric, but it really isn't.
But in terms of food, I think it was really all this time. I have this house in Maine where I have this close friend and I also live with. He's always been a cook. He's also a friend of my friend Paul's, our friend Paul's. And it's like there's a running little pattern behind all this that really emerged, I would say, in the 80s when I bought this house in Maine and we were in it all together. And to this day, that exists. And that's when I really started to cook.
Mm-hmm.
Because up to then, I hadn't really had home.
Uh-huh.
It's not about having a dinner party and, oh, look how fabulous this is. It's so much about taste and waking up in the morning and being able to make what you really want to eat.
Yep.
And I go back to Paul for that. This is Paul Schmidt. And I said, when he would say the thing about if you're an actor and you don't need money, if you know how to cook, you'll never starve.
Mm-hmm.
But what is cooking? It's knowing what you want to eat.
Yeah.
And so if you say, all I want for dinner is, I want this. Like tonight, for example, I have this local sausage and some lentils I made last night, and I have a big green salad with a mustardy balsamic dressing.
Ooh.
Hello. And a good piece of bread and some cheese. I think cooking is so much about eating. I think sometimes, this is from the past, because I don't think we have that competitive cooking as much anymore. I have no idea, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But I really like staying at home. I really like cooking food for myself. I love leftovers. I love getting something that's been sitting there and then putting an egg on it or making a frittata or making that to me is, I think, living here where I am now in this place that looks like a little house. Mm-hmm. I have this fantasy that I'm not actually in a city. I'm in a country house. I can walk out the door and I hit the street because I was always a city child.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you have both. To
be the best of all of that is saying, well, I know how to do this. Mm-hmm. I know how to make something that's going to feed me, and if I have someone with me, feed us.
Yes. And also, to a certain extent, too, and I only know your house by description. My wife has been there, I have not, but I'm looking at just what I can see. And it's obvious that it's important to you how you see as well as how you taste, because it's all part of the same thing.
I think it is all part of the same thing. By the way, this place that I have, see behind me is this red? Yep. I inherited this crazy place I live in. I did buy this mirror behind me, but it is a very eccentric but semi-shabby Victorian joint. And one place I did do over was a little kitchen. And I painted this matte dark green because I wanted to feel this sort of nest-like thing. And it's not a place with a view. There's no beige in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I realized I like this idea because I came here, 3-4 years ago. I like this idea of a little cocoon. And it's actually worked out great because I lived here for 3 years and with my lovely dog. And I love this thing of not having to eat when I'm supposed to eat. I love bringing food with me. I love saying, I'm just not hungry now. I think at this point in my life, but the best thing is knowing how to cook, knowing how to, you say, I really want this and I know how to do it. Or I know how to follow a recipe.
Yes. And also it enables you, for instance, you just described something where you said, I had this and I had this and I put them together. It's also recreating something that you've already created.
Yeah. I mean, most of traditional cooking is about the reality of feeding a lot of people figuring out something delicious to do the next day. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, whether it's for 20 people or whether it's for 4 people, in the old basic thing, that was it. I also am curious about Chinese food, which seems much more, okay, what we got before it didn't, that's a very different thing when having a sort of garde-manger situation,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are Greek by descent. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in West Virginia in a coal mining town, but
right.
my father owned a restaurant.
Oh, I think I remember this.
So I was exposed to not only the Greek cooking at home, which my mother did, but she was very young when they married. He was 35 and she was 19.
Wow.
And he was already a businessman who owned the restaurant with his brothers. And so my experience growing up was essentially the Greek cooking at home, but then the restaurant cooking, which was the clientele were coal miners.
Yeah.
Were coal miners, but also lawyers, doctors, because it was a county seat. So it was a very sort of melange of socioeconomic backgrounds. And so the food had to reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was, sort of a prefix lunch. When I say prefix, I'm toning it up because it was essentially, like a Salisbury steak and French fries and vegetable.
Yeah.
But everything fresh. There was a chicken abattoir in the alley behind the restaurant. My dad would butcher a side of beef and cut it up for all the different,
wow,
for the liver, for the steak cuts, for the burgers. Everything was in-house. All the pastries were cooked every day or baked every day by the same guy, 5 o'clock in the morning. He'd make the pies, the cakes. It was quite varied and also endless.
Yeah.
The choices were endless too, because one week I would eat at the restaurant at dinner because my dad would work evening shift. And then the rest of the week he was home for dinner. So it was I was totally immersed in food when I was growing up, which is why I decided to do the podcast about food, growing up around food.
Yeah.
Because that was my experience, and I couldn't wait to get away from it and go away to college, but I've never left it.
Yeah. Well, so you took it with you, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a stowaway in your life.
Very good. Thank you.
And now it's in the first class cabin.
Well, first class, sometimes it's economy. It depends. Yeah, exactly. I was actually thinking about this because I remember when I've worked in London over the years, the food has changed dramatically, particularly the restaurant food. Yeah. And also the availability of food. How have you experienced that? How long have you been there long enough to have done it?
I've been going to London back and forth for 20 years, been working here, whatever. About 2017, I came to do a play, and I really started to realize that that's where I wanted to be, very gradually.
Yeah.
And in the end of 19, I came here, and that's when COVID hit, and I was, as you well know, but I was here, but I realized I wasn't stuck here. I felt home here. And that's when, and I was in a flat, so I made a lot of food, always made food for myself, because that's what you did. There was a Whole Foods around the corner. You could go in with your mask on and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I never, even though it was an apartment hotel, I never ordered from room service. I really liked the ritual of going online and finding recipes and this, that, the other. Also, for this chapter of my life, I think I did more cooking then than ever, and it was a way of, getting through it all. But I think in terms of restaurants, well, there's a politics of restaurants, as you well know.
Mm-hmm.
Things have closed. People have been taken over by another set of people, this, that, and the other. I think that, and also it is quite expensive here. And sometimes your closest friends are not people who want to spend that kind of money. I mean, it's just, that's it. Sometimes, but I find that when I was first here, even after COVID, before and after COVID, I went out more. But now, because, to be honest with you, friends are getting older, and everyone wants to go out.
Yeah,
it's not like New York where you go out. that energy isn't here, I find that I think the quality of the food is excellent. And I find that when I go to a restaurant, the atmosphere of the restaurant is almost as important as the food.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some places get away with a lot of stuff because it's good atmosphere. But I find all in all, because I cook myself so much,
Mm-hmm.
I go out to feel the restaurant.
My experience was that I started working there on and off. I'd come and go back in the 80s, and there was not a great scene of restaurant eating there.
Yeah.
As the years have progressed and I've gone back occasionally, it's changed dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. I was never here in the 80s. I think around late 90s, 2000, as a grown-up working person.
Yeah.
I started spending time in it. It would vary so much. But I agree with you. It's all in all shifted unbelievably since then.
Yeah, much more. And I just thought of it just in terms of the geography. London is much more spread out.
Oh, yeah. Reminds me more of LA than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas Manhattan is Manhattan. It's a
grid. It's a grid.
It's exactly. I hesitate to conclude, but at some point I must. And I always finish with a question that you may or may not be in tune to, but I'm just going to throw it at you anyway. If there is one experience you have, a contemporary experience, something that you're making a meal for yourself or you're at a restaurant and there's a smell or a taste that takes you back to a time in your life, particularly a time of childhood, but if not of childhood, when you were much younger, what would that be?
Bacon. Bacon.
Mm.
I love bacon. Good bacon, back bacon, pancetta. I remember my father, who's from the South, he used to have grits with crumbled bacon on top.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had grits in the restaurant, even though West Virginia is a border state. It had enough of a Southern influence. And I've always been a big grits fan. In fact, we made polenta last night, and it's sort of a relative. It's a relative.
Yeah. But I realized that, I don't know, there's something about pork.
Yeah.
No, what that is, it's that, but it's basically it's either bacon, pancetta, guanciale. I mean, it's something about that it's like you could have egg, bacon on toast.
Oh,
I'm a happy person.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as you say it, because I remember when I was a kid, we used to eat sort of half-cooked bacon.
Yeah.
There was a little slippery, none of this crisp bullshit.
Yeah.
This was slithery, slightly unborn bacon. There's something about it's a combination of things with foods that are smoked.
Yeah. And bread. I love good bread. I mean, really crazy good bread. I mean, I don't like this sponge, but if I have a salad, piece of crisp, or not so crisp, on it, piece of cheese and some good bread, I'm done.
Yep. Yeah. The best.
I hate to commit, but that's it. Everything else is gravy.
No. Oh, you took me back. And with that, I want to thank you, Stockard Channing, for joining me on Cooking by Heart.
Thank you.